Hey, happy Halloween, everybody. Welcome in. It is Friday, October 24th, I believe. I've got my spider fascinator on, getting ready for the Halloween season, although I didn't quite do my hair around that. So happy Halloween or happy early Halloween to everybody out there. Again, this is Fab Friday episode number 60. Welcome in. I see we've got Lynn Pfeiffer checking in from Albuquerque. Good morning, Lynn. How are you? I hope all is well where you are at. Today we're going to do like a quick in and out. We're popping in to say hello to everybody. Of course, it's our annual or monthly Fab Friday program. We do this every month at about this time, 9 a.m. on the Colourwerx YouTube channel. You can always watch the replay, and I hope you do, or send it off to friends. I've got my mug going. This is the sad part, and then you turn it, and then we're happy. So we're kind of festive here at the Colourwerx Dezign Haus, of course, for Halloween, and we're pretty excited. We've been kind of hunkering down this last month, been a little quiet, finishing off a couple magazine quilts projects that you'll see coming out in spring and summer. Actually, one will be coming out in a winter issue of Quilt Maker, which will come out very soon. And then another one will come out in the spring issue of Quilt Maker, which is just gorgeous. And I just got it back from Teresa, who is our machine quilter extraordinaire out in Yakima, Washington. And so she did a beautiful job with some beautiful free edge-to-edge quilting on this particular magazine quilt, which I can't wait to show you. But of course, we all have to wait till the magazine quilt comes out and published. I'm not allowed to really share anything about that. But onward to other news. Like I said, this is going to be a kind of a quick in and out. We're going to talk about our color twist pattern and also share some tips and tricks to give you on your paper piecing to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more understandable. And I think the color twist pattern is a great place to start if you've never paper pieced before. So we have been hunkering down, Carl, if you want to go to that slide, on our new patterns. Both are available to order right now up on our website. They're both 15% off. You don't need a discount code. Just go ahead, put them in your cart. You'll get the automatic discount there already priced in. And we're going to keep that discount going throughout the month of November as well. So Color Twist is here. It's a very beginner paper pieced pattern. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And the other one on the other side of your screen is Mirage. And that is a really, really nice pattern for doing precision piecing. It's a play on color and value, which is really nice. You know, Freddie Moran used to always say color gets all the credit, but value does all the work. So Mirage is fun. It's only 12 fabrics you need there. So to make that effect. So you're basically choosing 4 color groupings and maybe a light, medium, and dark value in each of those color groupings, or you can mix it up with analogous colors, light, medium, and dark values, and that makes it work. But right now we're going to hop over to the overhead, and I'm going to start showing you our color twist pattern and give you some precision paper piecing tips and tricks for that as well. So let's hop over to the overhead here. Hopefully my spider won't get in my spider fascinator hat won't get in the camera. But here is our pattern back from the printers. As you can see, it's full color. It's got directions and material lists here on the back for both the lap quilt that you see on the front. And there's some variations that you can do. So you can choose 7 colors and just repeat block to block, which I'm going to show you in the example I'm doing today. Or you can use like the cover version here where I've got 14 different colors going in rainbow order or color wheel order around these blocks. And then I have also done a 2-tone background between the dark background or black background and the light background. You can scrap up the background like you see here. I did scrap it up a little bit when I was using Shayla Wolf's Foundation 2 fabrics, which are now arriving at shops. This is a beautiful like tone-on-tone collection. So if you're looking for like a basic tone-on-tone fabric collection with cute little designs in it that don't overwhelm in the fabric and that it's all runs, you've got every color in the rainbow, then you want to go seek out Foundation 2. That's what it's called. Foundation 2 by Wyndham Fabrics, designed by Shayla Wolf. So back to color twist. There's directions for the lap quilt and then the variations meaning using 7 fabrics or 14 fabrics for the spokes, as I call them. And then if you want to do a 1-color background or a 2-tone background. And there's also directions for this table runner, which is really nifty. The table runner ends up being about 14 inches by, that would be 60 inches, although you could make it longer by making more blocks. And then the lap quilt is, let me just check my math here, 42 by 56 inches. Okay, so, and it's all the instructions are in there. You can see it's beautifully diagrammed by Carl with all these beautiful, lovely color diagrams and all the ways that everything goes together there. So that's available now for ordering up on Colourwerx.com. Of course, with the pattern, you're going to get the master paper piecing block. There's only one block, no matter what combination of fabrics you use. If you're doing 2-tone backgrounds or 14 colors across the spokes or 7, you only need this one block pattern. And so with all of our paper piecing patterns, we always give you, first of all, the dimensions of what the pattern should be. So you can see right up in here, it says 7.5 by 7.5. That is so when you go to make copies of this pattern, which you will need to do and make several copies on a foundation piecing paper, like Carol Doak's foundation paper that's out there. This is a letter size, or you can use a really thin Xerox paper. That's so when you go to make copies, you know that you need to set your printer at 100%. That's always true. You need to set your printer not to scale. Sometimes the printers are defaulted to scale to fit the image on the page. Make sure that that's clicked off on your printer. Make sure it's printing at 100%, not scale to fit. And then just to double check yourself after you make the first copy, we always put in a 1-inch scale box. A lot of people don't know what this is, but I'm going to tell you the 1-inch scale box is there is because that measures 1 inch. So that helps you figure out if you've got your printer set to the right settings. And once you make your first copy, if that 1-inch scale box does not measure 1 inch, you need to go back, double check your printer settings. Once you make several copies of the pattern and you've got the right size, let's look at the way we lay out our foundation paper piecing patterns here at Colourwerx. We're always going to give you an outside trim line. That's what the dotted line around the block means right here, this dotted dashed line. That's your outside trim line after you're done paper piecing the whole pattern. You also have the dimensions of what all the strips are cut at and what they're all labeled at letter-wise, because in the pattern, you can actually create for yourself a fabric color key, if you will. And you can see it right there on the last page. So if you want to use only 7 fabrics and you want to place them in a certain order, and maybe they're not running in color wheel order like mine are, then you can put a piece or a swatch of each fabric there to keep yourself in order to label what fabric A is for you, what fabric B is. A1 means if you're using 14 fabrics. So you would just label the first 7 A through G, the second 7 or 8 through 14 would be labeled A1 through G1. That's if you want to make this kind of effect that you see on the front cover with 14 fabrics going around on the spokes, as you see. And the pattern explains all that as well. On back to the paper piecing pattern page. So you've got all this, the dimensions. You also have sew lines here denoted. So we always number our sew lines so that you can keep your sewing straight. You don't get off kilter or you don't come out of sequence. And so you're always going to start with the first section labeled section 1. It's labeled sew line 1, sew line 2, sew line 3, sew line 4, and I'll explain the sew line 5 and sew line 6. This is a wonderful beginning paper piecing pattern. It's super, super easy. And what's better than that, it's super forgiving. So once you've made all your copies that you need, depending on what size you're making, you're going to want to take the paper piecing patterns and you're going to want to, here, hold on, I'm coming over, trim off the excess paper. So if you see here, this is what came out of my printer. And I don't need all this extra paper at the top or bottom of the paper of the pattern when I'm working with it on my machine. So you just trim it. Don't trim it to the dotted line because you want to save that when you're done making the block, and I'll show that to you in a minute. Just trim off the excess paper. And then the way you start with paper piecing is, now remember, you've got to wrap your head around this. You're actually going to place fabrics on the non-printed side of the paper. And then you're going to sew from the printed side. But before we start, one of the interesting things about the color twist pattern is you have to actually create your strips. So this is also in the pattern. It explains exactly how you do this. So instead of, paper piecing in the background strip and then adding in strip A, I'm going to have you, or instruct you in the pattern, to actually create these strips. So this is actually going to be strip A. It's the background, and this green is the actual colored spoke. Same thing here. This is going to be section 2 or strip B, basically, or strip 2, strip 3, strip 4, and 5, 6, 7 onward. And you would create so many sets of these strips based on whatever size you're doing. So if you're doing the table runner size, which I'm showing today, you create 16 individual strips that will be labeled, let's say, for example, strip 3, or 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, 5, 6, 7. But today we're just going to concentrate with these. So where do we start with the paper piecing pattern? If you've never done it before, super easy. You're going to start by placing your first strip, which is strip 1, on the unprinted side of the pattern. I know that sounds like totally backwards. So you're going to flip the pattern over to the blank side. Now this is where you need a little bit of X-ray vision, okay? And you're going to place strip 1 over the first section on there. So you might have to hold this up to the light, put it on a light box to make sure you've got your strip exactly in the right place. And one of the things I should add, and I forgot to add, was we also gave you on the paper pattern, I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, so Carl will let me know. There's a little dotted gray line here in each strip section that says strip number 1 seam guide. That is just a guideline for you so that when you're placing your strip over each section, it's kind of like a guideline of where to orientate this seam line that connects the background strip to the colored strip. You don't have to be exact with it. That's the great thing about this pattern. You don't have to have it even perfectly. You just want to make sure that your spokes are actually kind of alternating in and out to create that kind of wonky look. So I'm going to place my first strip. This is strip 1 with the background, which is dark blue. The green is the actual colored spoke. And I'm placing it on the unprinted side of the pattern. Seam, the wrong side where the seam is facing down towards the paper. And so I'm just getting it approximated over that section 1, which is strip 1 on the bottom of the page. The main thing to make sure is that my strip actually extends beyond the dotted line here, which is the outside of the block, and beyond the dotted line on the other side, and also beyond this dotted line here, as well as a 1/4 inch over the sew line 1. So you kind of have to hold it up to the light, make sure that you've got it kind of in the middle of that section with the edges of the strip extending out beyond the section, if that makes sense. Now, one of the things I like to do is, because these are all at angles, and when I take my next strip, which is strip 2, and I need to place it right sides together, see how that is? I'm going to place it right sides together along the sew line that's actually on the printed side of this pattern. Well, gee, I don't have X-ray. I can't see through that fabric. So what I'm going to do is actually fold both the strip itself, the fabric strip, and the paper back onto itself on sew line 1, which will actually crease this fabric and give me an indication of where to place that next strip. So here I am just basically, and I do this with every paper piecing pattern. I'm going to just crease it. If you can see that, I'm creasing it on sew line 1. But what happens magically is I end up with a nice, did you see that, Carl?
Yes, we did.
A nice big crease going along the fabric there on top. So now I know exactly what my sew line is. It's this line that is creased. That's where I'm going to sew when eventually I get strip number 2 placed right sides together over strip 1. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. And in order to take this over to my machine to sew it, I need to place it right sides together. Do you see that? So this is what it'll end up looking like once it's done, but I need to place it like this along that sew line, but make sure I'm about a 1/4 inch above that sew line, of that crease line, actually, when I place these two together. Now, if I want to, I can actually then just pin these two strips to the paper and then take this over to my machine like that. The main thing you want to make sure is that the bottom strip is still extending, the green strip, if you will, beyond the dotted lines on the back side of the paper, and that this second strip, strip number 2, is about a 1/4 inch or even a 1/2 inch. I've given you a lot of fabric here when you've cut these and made these strips for color twist. About a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch above this creased line that you see here, which is going to be your sew line. So what does that look like when it gets done? Well, voila. Let me move to the next thing. Here it is. So I have sewn on sew line 1 on my machine. Now I've reduced my stitch length to about a 2.0, maybe even a little less than that. I want to make sure that the stitch length is a little bit tinier, a little bit closer together, so that when I rip my paper away, it actually perforates the paper and makes the ripping go together, go much faster. But this is the way it goes into my machine. As you can see, I've got strip number 2 right side together with strip number 1, and I've sewn along in my machine like this, following exactly this line that says sew line 1. Now, the great thing about color twist pattern, again, like I said, it's a forgiving pattern. So if I'm a little off sewing, that's okay. Once I get that done, I've got to trim away excess fabric here. And this is the part that seems to confuse a lot of people when they paper piece. So this has come out of the machine like so. I have sewn on this side, and I now need to trim away the excess paper. Here we go. Very carefully, what I'm going to do is you're never going to trim the paper pattern. You're only going to trim fabric. So that's a big warning sign. If you take your rotary cutter and ruler and you're ready to trim the paper of the pattern, stop yourself and then rethink. So what we need to do is we need to fold the paper pattern out of the way. If you're right-handed, just remember this. You're always going to fold on the seam line the paper pattern to your left. If you're left-handed, you'll probably fold it to the right. But I'm right-handed, so we're going to fold it. Again, it came out like this. I'm just folding on the sew line 1, where that stitching is, right there. And I'm folding the paper basically out of the way is what I'm doing. And then I'm going to put my ruler there a 1/4 inch above that folded edge of the paper. And I'm going to actually cut all this fabric. Now, if I was going to cut my paper pattern, I would have to stop myself. The other thing to make sure is that you want to make sure that this strip, the second strip on, is not folded out like this. They should be folded over each other, right side together, the way they went into the machine. And we haven't pressed it open yet or anything like that. We're going to put our 1/4 inch line of our ruler right on the folded edge of the paper there. Notice I'm not cutting any paper away. I'm only going to cut mostly strip number 1 away. This is to reduce the fabric bulk behind the paper pattern and behind the strips. So once that's done, I get something that looks like that. And then I go over to my iron, and if I had an iron handy here, I don't, but I'm going to finger press this today. But I would then iron or press strip number 2 up and out to cover strip number 2 section there. And before I add strip number 3 in the same fashion, I've got to make sure, before I go forward, that strip number 2 is covering and at least a 1/4 inch above the next sew line. Does that make sense? So it's strip number 2, once it gets pressed outward, has to cover and go a 1/4 inch above sew line 2. If it doesn't, again, this is the place where color twist is a little bit forgiving, more forgiving than other patterns. I can actually fudge my sew line a 1/4 inch down if I had to. So that's the nice thing about color twist. Okay, again, I'm going to do the same thing. This is strip number 3 going on. Okay, already sewn together with the background and the color. I'm going to fold again. I'm going to fold and crease again on sew line 2 to find the angle at which I need to place the next strip in line. So there we go. Do you see that, that crease? Thank you, Carl. That crease that's in the blue strip. That tells me exactly where I need to place right side together the angle. And this is kind of a great tip actually that Carl came up with about folding back the paper pattern on the next sew line. Works with every paper piecing pattern, by the way. Because a lot of times when you're paper piecing, because you're having to come from the back side, wrap your brain in reverse, if you will, you tend to get angles mixed up. You don't know which way to place things. So by folding on the sew line, you immediately know that this is the sew line, the way it's angled. Therefore, your next strip has to go on following that angle. Now, here I'm just making sure that my spokes are offset each other. So I want to make sure, again, I've got the guideline back there to help me if I need to on the paper pattern. A lot of times when you do the first one, you go for the guideline. Once you do the second and third blocks, you're like, well, I don't need that guideline anymore. You just want to make sure that the seam lines that connect each section are offset each other to create that spokey look. Once you get that on, let's say it would go there, right? Again, I can pin or I can just take this over to my machine, and of course I would flip it over and sew from the paper side right on sew line 2. What does that look like? That looks like this. And I know that looks kind of funny, but what I did is I sewed on sew line 2. This is strip number 3, right side together over strip number 1 and 2. And I now need to, before I press it up and out, I now need to get rid of the excess fabric. So again, I'm going to flip the paper pattern over to the printed side. And because I'm right-handed, I'm going to take the paper part of the pattern, fold it back on the seam line, which is sew line 2. Now here, where all the fabric bulks together at the center, this sometimes happens. You just have to rip or release the paper slightly to get it to crease back. So again, I'm not going to cut away any paper pattern here yet. I'm going to only cut fabric 1/4 inch above the stitching line to reduce all this fabric bulk. We don't need all this gack with us. There we go. Gone. It's all gone. Nice and trimmed away. Now I would take this back over to my iron and I would press upward and outward strip number 3. So you can see I've got that spoke effect happening. And you just continue on until you get done with your block of whatever many pieces need to go in your paper piece pattern. The color twist pattern looks like that when it gets done. And you can see here that this is the paper side. I've sewn on all the sew lines, of which there are 6. So there are 7 strips that get connected. I've tried to offset my seams. And now I need to square down this block. And this is one other tip I will give you. A lot of times, paper piecing patterns will give you, again, the dashed outer lines. Sometimes designers make that solid. I wouldn't trust those lines. So my point is that I would actually always use a square ruler. So if for some reason this paper has shrunk away with ironing and other things, that way you always make sure you're accurate. So here I know that this block is supposed to be 7.5 by 7.5. So I am going to use my square ruler. It's pretty well following the dash lines. It did shrink. The paper did shrink just a tad, like by 1/16 of an inch under the sewing and pressing and things like that. So that's another reason to always use the measurements on your square ruler and don't always trust the paper pattern. So again, now I'm going to trim this block to the size it should be, which is 7.5 by 7.5. And you will see what this looks like. Okay, there it is. So that is a finished color twist block, almost. Now, if you like not putting anything in the center here and you think you can deal with all that bulkiness because you've got 8 or 9 different fabrics coming together here, that's okay. You can leave the center off, but I actually designed, when we did this pattern, we designed it to reduce the bulk in the center to make it easier when you put 4 blocks together to create that kind of color wheel look. And the way that's done is once you're done squaring down your block like this, you go ahead and you add this little center triangle, which is your last sew line on the pattern, denoted as, it's actually labeled as sew line 7. Okay, and it's right across here. It's this little wonky, and we actually even made it offset so that you don't even have to match seams when you put 4 of these together, and I'll show that to you. So you sew your triangle on just like you did everything else, and then before you press this triangle back out to the center, we're going to actually cut away all this bulkiness here, which is kind of magic because it creates a really flat center, and you don't have to worry about, you know, all of those fabrics coming together in the center. So you can see I trimmed a 1/4 inch away from the seam line. I would then press this out, and you're going, well, wait a minute now, Linda, that's not square anymore. Well, you just press that center out, take your square ruler again, and you know it's supposed to be 7.5 or even with the edges. Just put your 7.5 inch lines on the outer edges here again, and just trim away the top and bottom of that triangle. And then, of course, if I had my iron here, you'd get this look right here. So that is a finished color twist block. And the magic happens when you start to put, let me just get that to go down. When you start to put 4 of these blocks together, you get that kind of spirating, what do you want to know, spiral. It reminds me of, like, what was that drawing, a spirograph or something like that. But it's like this rotating wonky circle of fabric going on that's very easy to paper piece. Now, and you can choose if you want to, you know, do 2-tone colors in the middle or 1 color in the middle. Of course, when you get the block done like this and you've got your center on, you can go ahead and remove this paper if you'd like, or you can leave the paper on and sew together the rows and then take all the paper off in one fell swoop. So that's kind of like a really, really fast, kind of dirty, fast and easy kind of tutorial on our color twist pattern that just came out, available up on the website for you to look at. But before I leave you, okay, any questions? No?
Let's see.
I'm looking at Carl across the room.
Linda wants to know, is the pattern Jelly Roll friendly?
It can be Jelly Roll friendly. There is only one strip that I couldn't make it out of a Jelly Roll. A Jelly Roll, of course, for anybody who doesn't know, is 2.5 inch strips. And every single strip, with the exception of strip number 1, is 2.5 inches wide. And for some reason, this strip needed to be 2 3/4 inches. So that would be your first strip. Now, you could probably compensate for this strip by moving this sew line down slightly, but you'd have to move every sequential sew line down to compensate for that. So I guess you could do it that way, but I couldn't. I wanted this first strip to be kind of not massive, but you know, large, if you can, like this, where the green is. So, and when it went to 2.5, it became too thin for us, and that's just a design point. So to answer your question in a really roundabout way, it is Jelly Roll friendly, but there's only one strip that isn't. I
guess if you had a Jelly Roll, you could match
the
first piece from a
yes,
stash.
Yes, you could. Anybody else?
Nope.
Okay, so that is the color twist pattern. Now, before I leave the overhead, we just got in. Like I said, we have been hunkering down, doing busy work, but we just got in. I'm going to lay it out. Oof. This is some strike-offs, and strike-offs are so that we can approve the colors coming out. But this is our new Kaleidoscope Butterfly collection that will be out with Benetex Fabrics next spring, I believe. And look at these fabulous colors. So they're so Colourwerx and so coloricious. And so we've got butterflies. We've got like we call these pods, but you know, it's kind of like what the cocoons, that's kind of like what we were thinking is like when the butterflies are metamorphosizing and hanging out in their cocoon, getting ready to unveil themselves in their beauty. We've got, you know, kind of this kaleidoscope effect going on. We've got another beautiful, this makes a great binding. It's kind of a wonky, wavy stripe going on. If you can see that, that one's called ripple. So when they fly, it creates a ripple through the air. And then we've got this beautiful kind of tone on tone with the little butterfly happening here. So this is great. And these are all strike offs so we can approve colors. Of course we did, and they were beautiful. There's going to be a 108-inch backing fabric as well of the cocoons, or what's called did we call this metamorphosis? I think we did. Yeah. And but it's 108 inch, so you can see it's quite larger than the one that comes in. So that's a great backing fabric in both a white and a blue there. And then there's also, this is like, you know, the best part, there's a huge 1 yard butterfly panel. So these are 8 by 8 inch squares, and you can cut them out. You can fussy cut them out. We've got a couple patterns coming out that will go along with this 1 yard panel. Of course, our freeze frame quilt would use these perfectly. Some are set on point or on a 45-degree angle. Some are not set on a 45-degree angle. They're just kind of, you know, tilted to one side. So there's lots of uses. There'll be a couple free patterns that go along with this, like a table runner pattern and some pillow patterns and a little quilt that goes with the that'll be free to go along with the whole collection. But we are super excited about Kaleidoscope coming out to shops. It'll be arriving in shops probably April or May of next year, 2026. I know it just seems like it takes forever. But we've been working with Benetex Fabrics on this particular collection now for almost, I would say, a year and a half or so. So that is super exciting. We hope you guys will tell your shops to order the Kaleidoscope Butterfly Collection by Colourwerx out of Benetex Fabrics. So with that, let's see if anybody else has anything to shout out to us. It's been great spending this Friday with you. I hope that color twist tutorial helps you with any of your paper piecing. It doesn't have to just be, you know, color twist, but it is a very forgiving beginner paper piecing pattern. It goes very fast. And of course you could make pillows with that once you do 4 blocks. The table runner, you could just make a wall hanging, you know, or make it the center of a quilt,
or a tote bag,
you know, you can do lots and lots and lots. You guys are creative. You know what you're doing. So with that, well, Carl and I are going to wish you a very happy Halloween, everybody. If we don't see you, we'll be back next month about the same time, about the middle of November, for another Fab Friday. We're probably going to be talking about our Mirage pattern with some tips and tricks on that, and some color lessons and some value lessons next month. And so with that, we're going to wish you a very good Friday. Happy Colouricious quilting, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us.